All right, we'll call to order the City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission Joint Plan Development Workshop agenda for Monday. Kind of weird why it's a joint plan development workshop. But anyway, Monday for February 17th, 2025 at 5 o'clock p.m. Madam Secretary, roll call and certification of quorum will certify that the quorum of City Council is present, as all members are present and accounted for. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it over to you to introduce the commission.
The commission, the quorum, we have a quorum.
All right.
That
Deal.
good?
All right, with that, we'll turn to citizens' comments. Ms. Gladys, no one turned anything in, so with that, we'll turn to the purpose of the workshop number one, council discussion regarding the 2025 Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Master Trails Plan update. With that, Trent, we'll turn it over to you guys.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. And so we're obviously here for talking about the update to our Parks and Trails Master Plan. And this is really kind of a listening session to kick that off. So I'm going to keep it short and hand it off to Carrie Capers, our Director of Parks and Rec, to get us started. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Planning and Zoning. Thank you all for coming to participate in this joint workshop. This is one of the very preliminary stages of our 2025 master plan update. And in order for us to effectively update the master plan, it includes a series of community feedback and stakeholder feedback. And so this is one of 3 sessions that we would like to host with you all. Today, the purpose of today is just to really hear feedback from you all. Our consultant, Aaron Tooley with Baxter and Woodman, is going to lead the discussion today. And then as we make progress throughout the plan, probably about the October timeframe, we're going to come back and we're going to share some updates, letting you all know some of the findings that we have found so far and what's going into the development of that plan. And then the whole process for updating the master plan is about a 12-month timeline. So around January, we'll come back, February timeframe of 2026, we'll come back with a presentation of the plan for your recommendation and hopefully adoption at that point. So with that, I'll turn it over to Aaron Tooley. Thank you.
Welcome aboard. Make sure you just give us your name there for the record.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Aaron Tooley. I'm a planner with Baxter and Woodman. I am joined by my colleague, Jackson Marvel, who's the Deputy Project Manager for this assignment. But we thank you very much for your time this evening. We wanted to, as Carrie was mentioning, we are just getting started in preparing your Parks and Recreation Master Plan. This will be the first of 4 different listening or joint workshops we're going to have with you all and with the Planning and Zoning Commission. The first 3 will be based. This one, we want to hear what you have to say about what needs to be in this plan from your perspective. Then we'll have 2 other joint workshops where we'll be keeping you apprised of the strategies and recommendations that we are going to be recommending in this plan. And then the 4th time will be hopefully to have a public meeting or a public hearing and have the plan adopted. So with that, let me begin. We do have a very brief slide presentation just to give you an overview. There. So with all of our plans, we like to make sure that we get, of course, ample buy-in from your community, the residents of Pearland. They're the people we're working for here. We want to make sure that we are listening to them. And so we have developed a fairly robust public engagement program. I'd mentioned we will be scheduling joint workshops with you all. We also are using the Parks and Recreation Parks Board as our Citizens Advisory Committee. So we'll be meeting with them periodically throughout the duration of this planning assignment. We've already gone through multiple departmental meetings where we've met with internal staff within the Parks and Recreation Department to learn a little bit more about, again, how the Parks Department is currently structured, some of the issues, challenges, opportunities that we need to know going into this planning program. Actually scheduled for next Wednesday and Thursday, we have multiple small group listening sessions, including working with or meeting with the Pearland Prosperity Committee, but a whole series of different interest groups, as we did with the last time we developed this plan about 5 years ago, meeting with them to understand, again, what are their issues, what are their perspectives that we need to know about. But we're still, as Carrie mentioned, very much in listening mode, and so we want to hear a lot from them regarding what their needs are with respect to facilities, programmatic opportunities, et cetera. We'll also be meeting with the Pearland Economic Development Corporation, and again, as I'd mentioned, with the PEDC's Prosperity Committee. We will also be attending at least 3 different community events, like July 4th and a few others that we've scheduled. There's is it Springfest? Is that, yeah, we're gonna be attending Springfest, but so we'll have a pop-up booth where we can engage directly with your citizens to hear a little bit more about what they would like to see in their parks network. We will also be scheduling 2 community open houses. The first will be probably in the April timeframe, and it'll be more focused on confirming that vision for the future of your park system. And then the second community open house will be focused more on implementation. We want to make sure this is a very implementable Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And then finally, while we will be working off of your 23 online community survey, we will be facilitating or convening at least 6 express surveys to target audiences like sports and athletic leagues, for example, but 6 targeted express surveys to learn a little bit more specifically about what their immediate needs are. So that's public engagement in a nutshell. Oops. Sorry, there are only so many buttons here I can. Okay, good. Sorry, folks. So the first, we're structuring the 2025 Parks Plan to be a little bit more user-friendly or departmental-friendly, if you will. You can see how we originally structured the 2020 Parks Master Plan. This one is going to be more focused on specific divisions, how the Parks Department operates. And so each chapter will be focused on a particular division of the Parks Department. So, for example, beyond the introduction, we will have a chapter specifically on Pearland's parks and trails. So we're going to be looking at park distribution. We're going to be classifying parks as far as regional, community, neighborhood, pocket parks, looking at park conditions. And from the conditions assessment, we will be developing a GIS-based asset management program for all of the facilities and assets within the Parks Department's jurisdiction. From a sports and athletics perspective, we're going to be looking at, are there an adequate amount of practice, game, and tournament quality fields throughout Pearland? If we need additional fields, where should those fields be? From an indoor recreation, aquatics, and special events standpoint, we'll be, again, looking at facilities and the popularity of a lot of the current indoor recreation programs that the Parks Department provides. From a natural resources standpoint, we're looking at how we can enhance natural resources, create greater connectivity within your natural environments. We're going to be looking at existing parks to see where we might be able to help, for lack of a better term, naturalize certain areas within the parks, create perhaps microforests, a greater deal of shade to combat an increasingly warmer climate, that kind of thing. And then from an operations and maintenance standpoint, of course, we're always going to be looking at, does the Parks Department have the requisite staffing, particularly maintenance, to carry out its mission and operations? Where and how much revenues are generated through parks-related activities, and then compared to the amount of expenditures that the Parks Department is required to expend. So all of those will then, each one will have its own set of strategies and recommendations, but those will all be compiled into a very, again, implementable action plan, which is the strategic plan. Just some additional features, as I mentioned, or as I will mention. This is a Texas Parks and Wildlife Department compliant plan. Texas Parks and Wildlife Department requires that we engage in a demand-based assessment, which is all of that public engagement, a standards-based assessment where we identify community-wide standards for exactly how many parks we need, how should those parks be adequately distributed throughout the community. In principle, we like to think that no one should have to drive to a park, that parks should be within a 10-minute walk, within a half a mile of where one lives. We recognize that the Parks Department relies on HOA parks to satisfy the overall parks and recreation need. In 2020, we identified all of the HOA parks as well, so we'll be looking at those too. But then, as I'd mentioned earlier, a conditions-based assessment we will be developing, as well as a resources-based assessment. We will be looking at, are there additional kinds of resources? They might be a drainage corridor or easement, or a transmission corridor, or it might be some sort of publicly owned piece of property that could function as a park or a recreational facility in some way that could augment the amount of parkland that the Parks Department currently has. So that's what we'll be doing in the resources-based assessment. We'll also be, and I'm very excited about this, is developing an inclusivity-based assessment, where we will be not only looking at Americans with Disabilities Act compliance of your parks and immediate access to the parks with respect to curb cuts, crosswalks, et cetera, but we're also going to be looking beyond ADA compliance and really thinking about what are the other things that we need to be concerned about regarding our parks for people that might have some sort of disability where they might be really sensitive to too much sunlight, for example, or they might not be able to see, and so therefore maybe other senses might be more acute. How can we create our parks so they're appealing to people that might be, I don't like to say sensory deprived, because usually other senses will make up for whatever they've lost. So we're going to be looking at tactile, sound, smell, all of those different dimensions, and how we might be able to implement those kind of improvements within our parks. We're also going to be looking in this inclusivity-based assessment how we can improve just how kids play together, if they're from different social or ethnic or racial backgrounds, if they might not be able to speak the same language. How can we create facilities that would improve nonverbal communication between children so they can play successfully in your parks? We'll also be looking at cultural relevance. How can we make your parks a little bit more culturally relevant to the immediate area, if that is an opportunity? A couple years ago, we developed the City of Lubbock's Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and that was something that they were very excited about, was, for example, looking at neighborhood parks within a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood. How can we celebrate the heritage of certain ethnic or ethnicities within your park system? So that will all be part of the inclusivity-based assessment. We'll talk a little bit about that momentarily. We'll also be evaluating several other potential park sites throughout the community. This is a list of parks that the PEDC has provided us. We will be analyzing those park sites as far as the usability, potential usability as a park. We will be looking at provisional programs and space plans, how we might most efficiently utilize that land if it's in the right area of the city for an additional park. We'll also be providing the Parks Department and PDC with planning level order of magnitude costs for what would it take to stand up an athletic complex in this particular facility or park, if that's the way, if it's appropriate. And then we'll be ranking those sites appropriately. And here is a list or a map that identifies the 9 locations. And so, as you can see, there are several in East Pearland, which is an area that is in need of some additional parks as well. So beyond those parks, we're also going to be looking at how we can programmatically augment the Shadow Creek Ranch recreational area with additional walking trails and more passive recreational facilities. One of the things we'd like to really address in this plan is when it comes to special use facilities like athletic complexes. Typically in communities where we work, those athletic complexes are typically shut down and not used for anything but sports and athletics. So we're interested in how we might be able to further program additional playgrounds and play areas so those parks can be, or athletic complexes might be able to be used more for other activities around the year. With the expansion of the Knapp Activity Center, we will be looking at what kind of programmatic improvements we might be able to include on the outside of the Knapp Activity Center, how we might be able to create a greater indoor-outdoor relationship for the senior citizens that utilize that center. So we'll be looking at that from a kind of a programming and schematic design standpoint. Again, as I'd mentioned, we will be conducting this operations-based assessment. One of the interesting issues that we've been working on over the last couple of weeks are changes to the CAPRA standards. CAPRA stands for Commission for the Accreditation of Parks and Recreation Agencies. It's kind of like that blue ribbon standard for parks agencies, of which your department, of course, is a CAPRA accredited. So great feather in the city's cap, but they're changing their standards after 30 years or so from 154 standards down to 68 standards to remove certain duplication, add some additional standards regarding sustainability, resilience, diversity, equity, inclusion related issues, that kind of thing. So we're analyzing that as a point of departure to make sure that whatever we do with this Parks and Recreation Master Plan, that we'll be able to help the Parks Department fulfill any additional credits or standards beyond the 154 that they already have fulfilled to maintain reaccreditation in 2027. Again, as I'd mentioned, we will be looking at sustainability and resilience best practices as well that might be able to be incorporated into your parks network and agency. So with that, that is a very quick thumbnail overview of several of the features that we're going to be building into your Parks and Recreation Master Plan. We do have several questions that we're prepared to ask, but we're very interested, again, as I mentioned, we're very much in listening mode. We want to hear from you all what we need to be concerned about when developing your parks plan. But here is a list of questions that just as a prompt for stimulating conversation, what are the issues, challenges, and opportunities that we need to be aware of when it comes to your parks network? I throw out accessibility, connectivity, safety, those kind of issues. Are there particular areas in Pearland where there's a need for specific park improvements? Much like, and I know you all know what a food desert is, well, we're talking about park deserts here. So where are there areas that we need some additional parks or recreational facilities? A little bit more about park inclusivity in your minds. What constitutes an inclusive park? We would like to think that all parks are all totally inclusive. Anybody can use any park all of the time. So would love to hear your thoughts on that. Beyond parks, is there a need for thinking from an urban forestry standpoint or a way of adding or enhancing some of your drainage areas, your detention and retention basins, other sloughs, et cetera? Is there a need for additional landscape or infrastructural enhancements outside of parks? And then most importantly, we want to hear from you what in your minds will constitute an excellent Parks and Recreation master plan. So we want to make sure that we're fulfilling your objectives as well as, of course, the community's objectives, but want to make sure going into this thing that we have a series of performance measures to make sure that this plan lives up to your objectives. We're very happy and feel fortunate that we're able to update this plan from 5 years ago. In conjunction with the last plan, we did develop a multimodal master plan that did, if you may remember that, but we did, the city received a Texas APA award as a gold award for transportation as a result of that. We like to pursue awards on behalf of our clients for doing excellent work, and we hope this will be an award-worthy plan. So with that, please let me stop talking. We'd love to hear from you all as well.
All right, then we'll handle it and go from there. I'm going to kick it to the Planning and Zoning Commission first. So, Mr. Chair, if you'll direct your troops.
Let's start over here in the wall, if that's okay.
Okay, I'm next. This is really reaching out there, but I just want to put the idea out there because I'm just curious. Have you guys ever looked, and please don't cringe at what I'm about to say, have you guys ever looked into cities? Have they ever done like a petting zoo? You know, when you go
Petting
to
zoo?
the rodeo, like the petting zoo is the most favorite thing of all kids, all activities. It's a sensory thing, it's a sound thing. Kids really love it. And then parents pay the few dollars to feed the animals. I don't know if anybody's ever done that, but I'm just thinking of.
I think that's a very interesting idea. I have never planned for a petting zoo, but I would think that we could figure that out. Whenever we go to the Houston Rodeo, that is one of my top spots is the petting zoo to take my granddaughter along with the baby pig races. But so that's something we can certainly look into.
I was just curious. Okay, and then you were talking about sensory in parks that connect with all kids. Are you all going to consult with someone who does therapy for kids that have sensory disorders?
Exactly right.
And they'll
Yes.
tell you exactly like, hey, these are the things you need to incorporate.
Yes, and also the National Recreation and Parks Association has several technical white papers that we're very familiar with, and so we'll be drawing upon the expertise from a lot of different specialists when it comes to, how can we make parks more inclusive from a multi-sensory perspective.
And then the other thing is that there's a big biking group here in Pearland, but I feel like they're always going to Manville to bike because they just don't have the bike trails. I'm not sure, but maybe reaching out to them. I think it's Pearland Cycles. If somebody could tell me.
Yes,
I
we
bought a
do.
bike from 'em,
One
but-
of our small group listening sessions that we're having later this week, we've included the local mountain biking group, Pearland BMX, and also there's a group of folks that have expressed interest over the years for skate parks. So all of them are being included in that. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that was, if I could think of something else, there was 4 things, but I can't think of the 4th thing right. But that was it. That's all my comments.
Awesome, thank you. And invariably, it's always like this, it's like right when we walk out of here, somebody will remember something that, if you can just mention, or if you have a question or a thought, please get in touch with Carrie and she can relay that to us as
I
well.
know what it is now.
Okay, great.
So when my kids were young here in Pearland, I wanted to sign them up for a summer camp that was not quite the daycare camp, but a little more activity. So we tried to get them into the Pearland Rec Center for camp, and it was completely full year after year. If I didn't sign them up by March, that was it. And so I would love to see, do we have the capacity to serve our community for parents that want to put their kids in summer camp? Because I think too, if you don't live in the city, you can sign up for camps here, but it fills up. It's extremely important. And the YMCA is very expensive. So that was the fallback, was something like that. So I would really love to know, as we grow, do we have facilities? Because obviously the Pearland Rec Center is completely full by March. So that was it.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. When y'all are putting together your inventory of the city, you said you look at the city parks and what we have now and how you can work more things into those parks. Do y'all also do a survey or inventory of say private parks, HOA parks, to understand what's out there as from an acreage and a facility standpoint? Is that included in that?
We did that in the 2020 Parks Plan. So we will be actually looking to the Parks Department for guidance when it comes to that. But as we are, we're going to be spending probably the most of the month of March on site doing our park conditions assessment, inclusivity-based assessment, et cetera. But so we plan to be stopping by HOA parks just to take a look at them. But we will be relying on the Parks Department when it comes to an inventory of those facilities, recreational facilities, and other facilities within the HOA parks.
And I would just stress that because I think, especially in a suburban developed community, those neighborhood parks are the only accessible parks to children, and to make sure that we actually know what's out there. When you, I know in the last one, there was a kind of a radius around our parkland to see what's within a half mile or whatever. But I want to make sure that when we look at these distances, we look at actual accessibility to the park, because a lot of times with that half mile, it goes over creeks or highways or roads. And so it shows that there's a lot of kids or neighborhoods within a half mile, but there's really no accessibility to those parks.
And I think that's an excellent point, John. That is something we have really been diligent about over the last 5 years. And what John is mentioning is that we will typically draw a 5 mile or a half mile radius around a park. What's important, what John's bringing up, is that that park might be immediately adjacent to a heavily arterial, like a heavily congested arterial corridor, something that would be very difficult for a mother with a stroller to be able to get across that street. And so it's really not fair to be thinking about the coverage of that park when there's, basically literally a wall on one side of it. So making sure that we address those kind of issues rather than just putting a blanket circle around the park is very important. So good point.
Thank you. And this one last, I think this would be a good time to look at our park dedication requirement with regard to what we've been getting with regard to the development. But I also think we need to look at incentivizing park development within new neighborhoods by offering a credit against that park dedication requirement, which would allow maybe a higher level of parks to be developed privately, be closer to where people would use them, and then would save some maintenance costs by having those facilities be private.
Very good.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, John just skipped my thought. I was going to say that the tree fund as well as the park dedication fund, if we might make some accommodation to some developers to, and I'm talking about residential land developers, to put some of those funds in towards their own pocket park above and beyond what they were going to do if they can get a super park out there. Now it's a much better park, I should say. It's also going to be maintained by the HOA and then not by the citizens of Pearland, so that might take off some burden. Other than that, my thoughts were, and I don't mean these to be criticisms at all. I believe this decision that I'm going to mention was made at the time, and the net result, though, and I'm thinking about the walking trail access off of Pearland Parkway, just north of oh goodness, the neighborhoods in the shopping centers on the Clear Creek side. There's only 3 or 4 parking spaces, maybe 5, and then a couple of handicap spaces. And it just seems such a shame that we put so much emphasis into that trail system. And my wife has walked it before. My daughter used to walk it when she lived close there. They raved about it, but there was never a good access. And when I brought that up, the answer is, well, they can park at Lowe's. That's not, Lowe's would allow it, sure. They're not going to say no, but that's not the purpose. And I'm going to reach out. Ms. Capers just gave me her card, and I'm going to reach out to her because I have an idea. I know the landowners of the property next door, so maybe there's a deal to be made there. Secondly, a suggestion, when I drive Magnolia, I do drive past of course, the KPB site that the city owns the building and the nature center next door and the huge pond and the walking path that they've built there. Fantastic. I see people there all the time. Used, I would say, the parking lot is full as well many evenings, when we have good weather. There's also 2 more huge drainage, I don't know if I call them drainage ponds, detention ponds. I'm not sure if the mud owns them. There's 2 of them separated by, it looks like a pipeline easement. They went in and redid something with the pipelines a couple of years ago, but it always made me think if we could get access to those, if the Parks Department could incorporate those into their, land holdings, whether by contract or by ownership.
Those are owned by the city.
They are owned by the city?
Those are city ponds, yeah. That's the Marys Creek detention ponds that were done out of the
West Marys Creek.
West Marys Creek.
That's fantastic. I mean, could we be able to utilize then the either the drainage channel that runs on the east side or the pipeline easement that cuts through the middle of them? If we could utilize those for parking, there's some free walking paths and walking trails if you wanted to try to connect them. I don't know if that's even an option, but anyways, I always thought they're there, let's utilize them. So those are my comments. Thank you. Anybody else have any wrap up? Thank you, sir.
I just wanted to mention in response to your comment about your last comment, we feel very strongly, and that's why with this resources-based assessment, we're going to be looking at all of that, so much infrastructure, and thinking about how can we use that for, again, parks and or something beyond what it's currently used for, like drainage, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, we feel that there's a real opportunity there. Thank you.
All right, we'll open it up to council. Questions, comments along this, for this workshop? Anybody have anything? Ms. Cade?
Yeah, I heard one of your slides said 9 park sites. You're looking for, I don't remember the exact verbiage now. Is it actual park sites or sports facilities?
Yes.
They're basically undeveloped land that I'm not exactly sure what several of the sites are actually being used for currently. So that's one of the things we're going to be looking at. But these were sites that the PEDC had identified, owned by others, I think, to a large degree. But so we will be looking at them probably from a programmatic standpoint, from an athletics kind of perspective. But hopefully we can build additional park facilities into those as well, if they're appropriate. Am I answering your question?
Yes, I mean, parks and sports facilities aren't the same to me, but
Hear that? Yeah.
Yeah, so with those sites, we shared all of those with you probably about a month ago when we were preparing to develop the plan. We're going to be looking at what the needs are that come from the plan. One of the questions that we always get asked is that, you know, we have all of these needs, but where would we even build it? And so we identified potential sites that could be possibly acquired in the future to build some of those additional park amenities. So what exactly that recommendation is, we don't know yet, and we won't know until we finished our stakeholder meetings and looked at our trends and looked at the things that our community needs, and then we'll determine whether it's athletic fields or natural resource area, nature areas, or you know, there's a lot of different uses that could be designed in those spaces.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Bynum?
Site for a petting zoo. Beg your pardon.
Oh.
All right. You gonna let me go first? Yeah, couple of comments. Funding. We don't have money to fix potholes and to get the fire apparatus and PD staffing where it needs to be. And we all love parks, but a great plan that's gonna cost us, what, $250,000 to get done is gonna show us all these beautiful things we can do. Bring the funding with it. Whatever outside the box ideas there are, but the general fund is spent. And along that line, I think if the PEDC identified the sites, then they have to fund the park. Is that how that works?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
That sounds like a good plan, Tony.
Yeah. On 6.0, your operation and maintenance, we're understaffed and underfunded. So that's the cliff notes to that. It's going to be by how much, but you could go to across any department here. I mean, EDC might be the only one that's somewhat staffed and funded, but that's where we end up. So to me, that's back to funding. When we talk about HOA parks, what happens when the HOA doesn't maintain the parks? And it's great if we get something beautiful while we're selling through the homes, and then developer's gone, and 5 to 10 years later, it turns to pot. Nobody cares who's on title and says, oh, that's the HOAs. They're going to be calling Carrie. Couple things I passed on to Carrie already in terms of programming. I think it was called Go Ape over in Fort Bend County. And I assume that's where the city or the county leases space and someone can come out and program it and then charge a fee. I love that idea. The tickets weren't cheap, but it drug us all the way from Pearland to the other side of the world, it felt like. So ideas and programming like that I'd be a fan of. And I guess y'all did a great job back in 2020, and you're back again. And this is no bash on you, but the reason you're back here is because the TPWD grants require us to be. And so this is more a philosophical thing. Is, you know, we're looking at a Citygate report on the fire side that's over 8 years old, and we're not doing a new one of those. But I feel like we're kind of forced into doing this. I don't know if there's any way I'd rather spend this $260K on actual changes and improvements that people can see versus a shiny plan, as great as it might be. And maybe it turns loose all this funding that we don't know about, but this I don't know. I struggle spending this kind of money, and I get why we're doing it, but man, it's a lot of money that is not going to fix a rusted out slide at one of these parks. That's all I have for now, Mayor.
If I may respond, thank you very much, Councilmember. Just to answer a few of your questions. So with the 2020 plan, we did have an appendix that was entitled Funding for Implementation, and we provided a lot of public, private, quasi-public opportunities, grant opportunities, other, again, federal funding opportunities, et cetera, that the Parks Department could potentially tap into for proposed park improvements coming out of the master plan. We like to think that in order to pursue funding, you've got to have a plan. And so this is hopefully satisfying that need. I think Carrie could probably attest to the amount of revenues that have accrued as a result of the last plan. So hopefully that will be similar with this planning program as well. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of my comments echoes a little bit about what Member Carbone was talking about. I'd like to see us look at opportunities on how we can utilize our park systems to offset some of their costs. You know, I realize that parks are a public amenity, but things like camps and utilization of the natatorium, things like what Tony just mentioned, third parties being able to rent and have events and things of that nature. How can they generate some revenue that can then be used for the parks versus having to figure out how we just fund everything all the time? So that was one. I like that you guys are looking into the use of athletic fields. I think if you go on one 5-minute listening tour, you're going to find out we don't have enough baseball fields. Baseball is huge, and that's what everybody says all the time, is we don't have enough places, mainly to practice is what I hear. Not necessarily to play. I don't know if you guys, same thing, but practice fields, which aren't generally all that elaborate, you know, versus building something where you have big tournaments. But one of the main attractions we have in Pearland right now is our sporting fields, and we get the updates on people that are brought to our community for, you know, hotel usage and how there's a boon to our economy from these events. So how do we continue to further that or improve that or utilize that across our city? So we like that. There were a couple of things that you mentioned that gave me a little bit of pause, and one of them was you mentioned looking at, and this is in the realm of your inclusivity assessment concept that you're talking about, and you specifically gave an example of saying, well, if we have a predominantly Hispanic community, what can we do in that park that promotes that Hispanic community? I would rather us look at how we promote one Pearland as a community, not look at how do we promote the individual cultural differences of certain groups. I understand the logic or the thought process behind it, and I won't soapbox, but I think that's a huge part of why we have the division in our country that we have, is we've spent so much time focusing on these individual pockets of who we are instead of focusing on how do we pull everybody together. So I would be much more interested in a plan that says, how does this park include our community and all of the diversity? We have a very diverse community in Pearland, a huge one. So if we start, and I'm not, don't let me put words in your mouth, so please clarify, but if we start building Hispanic parks and Asian parks and African parks, we're promoting separation, not inclusion and unity. So, and if you want to elaborate on it, that's great. But that just, when you started talking about that, that kind of gave me a little bit of pause. And then the CAPRA standards, which start to bring in DEI, which you specifically mentioned, also raises concern for me as well. That's an ideology that was accepted in parts of our country for a while that's getting almost universally rejected at this point. And so I would be concerned about having that as a driving factor behind our parks plan. So those are my thoughts, comments.
Aaron, you got anything on that?
Sorry, Mayor?
Anything to respond on that?
I guess we will definitely take your thoughts to heart. To me, celebrating ethnic cultural heritage in your parks, that to me seems like more of a celebration, not something that is going to divide people. Yeah, I just think that that's worth a little bit more thought.
if I can give you an example from my personal life, where I do most of my business down at Crystal Beach, Port Bolivar area, there is a section of the beach down there that's considered Little Beach, it's primarily Hispanic. And it's been encouraged and promoted and celebrated that this is kind of Hispanic beach. Today, you will be removed from the beach if you are not Hispanic by the people that are there, which is wrong. That's not the way we should do things, especially in public areas. And that's not saying anything about the Hispanic community or any other community. My point in bringing it up is I've seen where celebration turns into separation if we're not careful. I guess that's what I'm really more concerned about, is how we be careful to celebrate, fine, but continue to celebrate the oneness of Pearland, not create pockets in our community. That's what I'm ultimately getting at.
Yeah, very good.
Fair enough?
Good deal. Any other questions, comments? I have a couple of things. I notice on here, I want to make sure that, well, let me ask a question. We're going to come back with a plan, and as Mayor Pro Tem pointed out, obviously funding is going to be the key on how you advance, and I'm sure it's going to have a list of certain types of projects. We already have a certain list of projects that are already in our plan, and not thinking that we're going to necessarily do away with projects, but probably add and enhance as to making this happen. We're putting a tremendous effort in our Old Town site right now. I want to make sure that this plan and the Old Town site plan are working cohesively together. I think we have an opportunity in the Old Town site to connect. Here's a connectivity point, making sure that coming out of that is how do we connect the trail plan on Marys Creek to the old town ditch and that back to Clear Creek. So that's a connection point. I'd be interested from your firm's perspective that in the event we did the one-way pair option and you've got Broadway going one way, how you do that linkage at that point across Grand Boulevard. So this is a little bit more detailed than probably a high-level plan, but I'd be real interested to know how we do that link across Broadway safely, securely, those types of things, because I think that's going to be key in showing a picture of how we do that. But also notice on here, there's really not an asset per se in the Old Town site for parks, but that doesn't mean, I mean, there is a couple of small parks there today. And I would hope that as part of the Old Town site that we're now talking about how do we program those and advance those and link them together. I think we also have an opportunity to expand the Marys Creek Trail, specifically here back over to Baker's Landing and 35, and hopefully eventually, beyond that. So there's some real opportunities, and with some linkage, I think you could all of a sudden have 20 miles of trail that gets opened up pretty easily. And back to the funding, we've been fairly successful at getting trail segments funded through TxDOT, and so 80/20 on a trail is far less expensive than a large master park, somewhere where we're funding it. So I'd like to see us making sure that we're doing that. As far as inclusivity is concerned, an inclusive park, from my understanding, is it's a park where everyone of all abilities can come together. It doesn't matter what their abilities are, they're together. I've got a nephew in a wheelchair, and all he ever wanted to do growing up, younger and younger, was I want to be on a playground with my kids, with my friends. It doesn't matter, what they're doing or what their abilities are. I just want to be able to be one of them together on a park, and not feel like he's the single one out, in a park setting. So I think anything we can do just along the way, along the time, making sure that we're integrating part of those into our physical parks, I think is a good thing. It comes back down to how we get it paid for. In inclusivity of those types of things, I think they're there's grant opportunities, probably more so in that arena than there are in some of the others. I think you'll find out as you do some of the studies that yes, from a sports tourism standpoint and both soccer, softball, baseball, you're gonna find a deficit in some of our facilities, and we need more. I think we could throw every square acre out here to a soccer field and it'd be full tomorrow, specifically for practice and those types of things. So I think it'll be important. What will this plan need to address for it to be considered successful? I think coming with a plan that doesn't just sit on a shelf, but one that is actionable and reasonably actionable. And I'll let reasonably just be in the eyes of the beholder at this point, because as mentioned, we go and put a lot of assets on the ground. Next comes maintenance, and we're already at a deficit and trying to make sure that everything else is maintained, including water, roads and drainage and those types of things. So just being smart in how we do that, I think would be good. See if I missed anything. Oh, on your input, you've got Springfest down. I'll also, Carrie, maybe, I don't know what their contract calls for, but the farmers market has also been a very successful opportunity to talk to several thousand people at one time. So I think those would be good. It's in a park, so just like Independence Park, just like Springfest is. So that'll be good. So any other questions, comments from folks? Aaron, let me kick it back to you. What other information are you looking for tonight while we're here?
Well, again, Mayor, thank you very much for all of your input. Really appreciate that. I did want to just respond in general about a couple things, and we recognize that we see parks as so much infrastructure, just like utilities, just like transportation, and parks. We're hoping that this plan will go beyond just quality of life improvements, but really look at economic well-being of your community. How can we enhance parks to where they are economic revenue generators, so you do realize a reasonable ROI on what you're expending for the preparation of this plan. So that's pretty important. Also, on when it comes to the comment I had made about inclusivity as having a cultural, ethnic bearing, one thing that we really want to make sure about is, and we just had a really great conversation with the principals of the Cultural Planning Group. They were the group that prepared your Cultural and Arts Master Plan. And I was mentioning to them how one recommendation from the Old Town Site Redevelopment Program is that we're looking at what would be the benefits of developing a cultural district in that area as well. What would be the advantages there? But how, and this reminds me of a parks plan we developed for the city of Odessa years ago, where we developed a public art trail that linked up all of the public art in the community. That then led to their parks being further used for displaying public art or facilitating public performances from different groups, that kind of thing. So we're going to be looking at that. How can we advance that plan through this plan? Because public art, public parks, there's a synergy there that I hope that we can accrue as a community. Further, with the Old Town Site, of course, you have Ziklinski Park there. We're going to be looking at how that is programmed. We have heard multiple times, although we've just started this project, that there's a need for additional civic space, public gathering spaces, both indoor and outdoor. One of the plans coming out of the Old Town Site Redevelopment Program will be reevaluating Grand Boulevard, how that might be able to be utilized as a public gathering space, a civic space, if you will. And then, Mayor, just to answer your question about access across Broadway. Jackson has been working very closely on that plan. Would you like to address that? Good.
There we go. So whether Walnut or Broadway is a one-way pair or not, typically a street that is safe to cross, it has a limited number of lanes, limited vehicle traffic, and slow speeds. So typically one-way streets are safer to cross because a pedestrian is really only focused on looking at one side of traffic, of travel. But that is being addressed in the plan, what specific crossings are going to be designated as those safer crossings, and that's where the shared use paths and trails to connect both Mary's Creek and Clear Creek systems will come together.
All right, back to the commission. Any follow-up, last minute? Anybody got it?
Anyone? No, Your Honor, and just for the record, I failed to say that all commissioners were present except for Commissioner Eisenberg, who's homesick.
Thank you for that. Trent, you or Carrie, any follow-up?
Any follow-up, Carrie?
I just want to say thank you all very much. This is a plan that we're building for our community. We want to make sure that we hear from everybody. It's not about what I want or about what Kevin wants. It's about what our community wants and needs. And each one of you had very, very valuable input, and we will take that into consideration as we're building out the plan. And this is just the first of several interactions with you all. So we'll keep you updated as we go through the process.
Sounds good. Aaron, last words?
No, but thank you very much as well.
All right.
Mayor, Council, Planning and Zoning Commission, thank you very much for your input.
Sounds good.
Look
Thank you
forward
for
to seeing
being here tonight. And with that, we will move to adjournment at 5:56.